And whoa, look at Magoo. Magoo streaks into the...
Thorpe's got past Gabors. They lock handlebars as they go through, but Thorpe's done.
Here comes Bradshaw to the outside of Bale. He takes over the number 2 position, and Bradshaw is not done.
Welcome, Motocross History Channel team. Today I want to talk about Kurt Nicoll, and primarily want to nail down on Kurt Nicoll's career, how it started, how he got so close almost to be able to taste the 500 world title so many times, and what happened and what kept him from actually winning one. Actually, he could have won even up to 3 or 4 titles, and why he made certain decisions in his career that left us fans just thinking, what is going on? Why at the top of your game in the 500 class would you switch all of a sudden to the 250s? He goes into details about his decision making at the time, and he's been on multiple interviews over the last 5 years, and he actually gives us really great insight, not just of why he made those decisions, what cost him ultimately the championship in 1992 when that whole incident went down at Hawkstone with the start gate, and his decisions after that left us fans puzzled as to why he made certain decisions. He even goes into the details, granular details of riding a 500, racing it at that level, how it feels to be racing a 500 in different style tracks, sand tracks, hard pack tracks, the roost that comes at you, how you feel the next day after riding it. He even talks about the comparison of those 500s in that day and uses as an example his KTM 500 from 1991-92, which was an awesome bike. He says it actually put out 68 horsepower, compares that to today's 450s, and what kind of comparison, if you were to do a competition, what it would look like. So this first clip that I'm going to show you is from him as a 19-year-old being thrown into the international spotlight when he got the whole shot at the 1984 Hawkstone 500 MXGP in the first moto, and everybody was like, who's this kid on a KTM air-cooled production bike, and how is it that he's doing so well? From that point on, Kurt Nicoll became a household name for 500 MXGP fans, and the next couple of clips are rare footage of his career, him on a Kawasaki when he switched to Kawasaki, him coming back to KTM, footage that is hard to find, that I was able to find for you guys, and this interview, which will be playing in the background as you can hear. He'll be able to explain it a lot better than me, but he had an interview about 5 years ago with Swap Moto Live. It's a great interview. The interviewer asks great questions to Kurt Nicoll about a 500, about just riding it, about what it's like, the power that it puts out. So without further ado, let's listen to this. This is going to be part 1 of 2 parts of Kurt Nicoll's career. So let's take a listen and let me know what you guys think. Let me know if there's any fans of Kurt Nicoll out there, how much you loved this dude, and how disappointed you were to see things like him switching to the 250 class, or seeing him get so close to a 500 title that you could taste it and then it not happening. So let's take a listen to this interview first.
So you raced 500s at the highest level. Did you prefer the 500s because the massive amounts of power it had? Because I mean, you made your mark in the 500 class and then did some 250 stuff later, right?
Yeah, no, to be honest, no. I don't think I ever preferred them. I mean, they're brutal. Mm-hmm. But at that time, during the 80s, the 500 class in World Championship was the class to be in. So I didn't even, when I was 18 years old, I went straight from doing 125 racing straight to 500, because at that time, you know, that was the place to be, and that's what I wanted to do. And then that gradually moved away, so that by the early 90s, you know, then the 250 class became the premier class, and that's when I moved to the 250. But you know, I don't know if it was much fun to ride a 500 two-stroke. It was just you know, I mean, the power of those things and the power delivery, it's no comparison to a 450. I mean, unless you're going to get in a dead straight line on a flat piece of ground, then they can hold their own, but that's about it.
What factory did you primarily ride for through your 500 career?
Kawasaki and KTM.
Okay.
So I had a couple of years with KTM at the beginning, then I rode 3 years I think with Kawasaki, then I went back to KTM for 3 years, and then primarily I rode Honda when I raced 250.
Okay, was in the 500 time, was that still the era of works bikes? Were you riding production?
It was at the beginning. I mean, works bikes were incredible right when I was a kid. I mean, when I first did World Championship Motocross, I actually did my first year on an air-cooled KTM, and there was 10 factory bikes, real factory bikes, and they finished first through 10th.
So as you can see through that interview, Kurt Nicoll, in his younger days, he was hovering between kind of like a privateer style and getting picked up by a factory team, riding an air-cooled KTM. And this clip here, this is in the early days, it's 1985 British Championship, which back then was a big deal. I mean, in the British Championship, you had David Thorpe, you had Kurt Nicoll, you had Watson, you had Anstey, you had Banks, you had so many big names that were big names in the MXGP scene, but when it came down to the British National Championships, that made for a great championship. As you can see at this race here, there are thousands of people lining the track. And so Kurt Nicoll, throughout 85, he stayed with KTM, and I think he became a KTM factory rider at that point. KTM went liquid cooled that year. And because it was a new model and the first new model, it had its issues. And I think based on his tone and the way he talked about KTM in those early years, he started to become a little disenfranchised with the KTM 500. And that was his last year with KTM. In 1986, he switched to Kawasaki, got a ride from Kawasaki and became a Kawasaki factory rider, which was the last real year of the works era. As he spoke in that first part of that interview, when the production rule went into effect in the United States, even though that law never existed in FIM, they kind of followed suit just because the 4 big Japanese factories kind of decided to start designing their bikes like that. So even though there were some factory add-ons, some works add-ons in the MXGP scene, they became closer and closer to factory type. Here's another clip of the 87 season. Nicoll got hurt in the 86 season, and I think he broke his leg. I'm not totally sure, but it kept him out of part of the 86 season. Not a lot of footage from that. But this is the 87 season. This is a great ride he put on in Farley Castle, where he actually won it. The Farley Castle 500 MXGP for 1987. Did a great job. Went head-to-head with Leif Pearson on the awesome YZM 500.
Yeah.
Because the bikes were so much more technologically advanced than a stock bike. So if you had a stock bike like I had, then you battled for 11th and occasionally got a 9th or an 8th or whatever. But then I had factory bikes after that. But then when the rule changed here, it changed in Europe too. So although the rule never changed in Europe, the factories immediately went production based whenever it was, 1987 I think, when the rule changed. Yeah. So true factory bikes kind of stopped around 86, 87 time.
Okay, what was a Works 500 like? Was it just insane power, or was it like really manageable and tuned down?
Yeah, no, it wasn't insane power. We never worked on making more power. I mean, all we did was work on making it more rideable. So, you know, the crankshaft was always the most important thing in the tuning of a 500 works bike, and we had these special crankshafts with tungsten in to make, you know, the inertia and make the power work like that. You certainly never needed more power. I mean, the KTM factory bikes that I had in 91, 92, they produced 68 horsepower.
Jeez.
I mean, so all you did all the time, and we could have made more power out of them, but I mean, it was pointless. They had enough power, so we tried to make them rideable all the time, and remembering that chassis technology wasn't what it is today, and so you looked for smooth lines on one of those things. And even if I watch some of the old videos now, you know, some of the tight lines we took in order to get a flat piece of ground and, you know, make some time up like that. I mean, it's different from today, totally different.
Yeah. You know, when I think of the 500 class, right, especially a full gate, what did you do to combat the roost from those things? Did you wear special stuff under your jerseys, or were you in an open face helmet with a face mask?
I had an open face helmet with a face mask, and you know, I got scars here and a few scars here where in muddy races where I had to take the goggles off and then the face mask off. But I mean, you woke up on a Monday morning and your arms were like black and blue, and then there was the roost guard, and then black and blue all around them. I mean, it was painful. I mean, some of those European tracks like a Roggenbull or something like that, I mean, you just never think about it when you ride though, do you? I mean, that's the thing, when we race, when you practice and you go and like, oh God, that hurts, but when you're racing you never feel it until the next day when you see how bruised you are.
So in 1988 and 1989, Kurt Nicoll really started to come into his own. In 1988, during the 1987 campaign, the 500 World MXGPs, Kurt earned the number 2 plate behind Giorgio Bay. To be honest, he wasn't in any contention for the title at the time. Giorgio Bay beat him by a lot. But having that number 2 plate for 1988 was a big deal. And in the second round of the season at Payerne, once again, Kurt Nicoll did a great job, ended up winning it, and started off the season in a strong position. Thorpe won the first round of the season in Austria, and Kurt Nicoll ended up winning the second round. And this is from Payerne. Excuse the bad quality. It was the only quality I can find that wasn't reserved. And it was a really good fight between Nicoll, between Thorpe, and between Wiemund on the YZM 500. So the next clip I'm going to show you is from Finland, where Kurt Nicoll ended up getting second place in 1989. Great shot. It's pretty rare footage. It's also in Finnish. So I'll put the Swap Moto Live, the rest of it, in the background, and you can see a great battle between Kees van der Ven and Kurt Nicoll in the sand.
Compare modern day 450 to the Works 500 you used to race. I mean, is there any comparison? I mean, 450s.
Well, yeah, they got 2 wheels.
Yeah, 2 wheels and a throttle, right?
Set of handlebars, but I mean, riding wise.
I mean, address this for the fanatics that comment every time on our website, like, oh, 500 would smoke that 450.
Well, it would smoke that 450 on a flat piece of ground and for a short way, because it has more horsepower. Genuine horsepower, yes, but tractability, I mean, that's the thing about a 4-stroke. I mean, you can accelerate a 450, a modern 450, and it'll tract over the bumps. It doesn't break out, it doesn't break loose. If you make a mistake on a modern 450, go a little bit sideways with the throttle open, I mean, it'll normally straighten up. Mm-hmm. If you got stepped out of line on a 500 2-stroke on a bump or a jump, I mean, it normally threw you in the ground and sent you to the hospital. So, you know.
So that's great insight from Kurt Nicoll on the differences between a 500 2-stroke and a 450 4-stroke. When it comes down to it, bottom line, 454 strokes are easier to ride, they're more manageable, they're more user-friendly. That brutal power just simply doesn't exist. Now, let's get back to 1989. Kurt Nicoll was, like I said, he wore the number 2 plate for 1989. He took a distant second to Eric Boers in 1988. 1989, while he was still on the Kawasaki KX500, SR500 actually, the field in 1989 was completely packed. And entering into that field full time was Jeff Leask. Jeff Leask was just simply a talented rider, God-given gift on a 500 that just other people struggled to get to that level, and he did it effortlessly. In his first year in the full season on the 500s, he made a huge impact, and his impact was so great that it actually got him to the number 2 spot for 1989. Erica Bors had a pretty bad get-off toward the end of the season, and it was, until then, it was head-to-head. It was Erica Bors and David Thorpe trading blows every round, and the points lead would switch, a couple points here, a couple points there. And then toward the end of the season, Erica Bors had a pretty bad get-off. I'm pretty sure it was in Edelbrook, and that's where everything changed. And David Thorpe took a huge lead when Erica Bors was not able to finish one of the motos, and that's all that was needed that close to the end of the season. Jeff Leask's riding was so impactful to the season that he ended up finishing second in the points. And honestly, when you had people like Erica Bors, Dave Thorpe, Jeff Leask, Kurt Nicoll, Billy Lyles, Jackie Martins, even Kees van der Ven, I mean, the top 8 could, on any given day, could win a moto in the 1989 season. That's how great that season was. So Kurt Nicoll was in that pack, but his competition was so stiff. And I think that there was parts, even though he didn't fully admit it because he doesn't like to speak poorly about any of the brands for which he has ridden, because he's a gentleman and that's just not his thing. He ended up finishing 4th in the points, and that was during a year where he didn't have any major get-offs, didn't have any major injuries. So his plan to start over again, his plan was to get back to KTM for 1990. And that was what he ended up doing, and that ended up working out for him in the long run. Here's a clip of the top 3 finishers in the 1989 season, and they were all HRC factory riders, all riding modified RC 500s, and we all know that Honda pretty much ruled the 80s and into the 90s, and the 500s were no different. If Erica Bors and Edelbrook had not had that crash, then he could have easily, it could have been up to him, he could have easily won the championship. That's how close he and Dave Thorpe were. Now, since Dave Thorpe won it, there was going to be a big shakeup in 1990, which a lot of people didn't know about. The only ones that would be staying with HRC for 1990 would be Jeff Leask and Erica Bors. David Thorpe would move to Kawasaki, and Kurt Nicoll would end up moving to KTM to be their #1 rider. Because of this, Kurt Nicoll had way more of a chance of earning that top spot and making 1990 his year. The difference between that was nobody expected Billy Lyles to have the breakout that he did in 1990. And the first 4 rounds of 1990, Billy Lyles pretty much owned them. Everybody is, of course, when they line up at the gate at the first round of the first moto of the season, they have those huge aspirations, and their teams really are 100% behind them. And this first round of the 1990 season ended up being at Vulcansward in the deep sand, where Kurt Nicoll will openly admit that that was not his strength, the deep sand. So we'll see here in a clip coming up in a couple of moments how that went for him at Vulcansward, and changed things, the trajectory for him going into the 1990 season into round 2. But the 1989 season was very special. It was probably, to be honest, it was probably the best season for 500 MXGP World Motocross. And I'm going to throw all the classes in there. It was probably the most exciting season for that it occurred probably within decades. That 1989 500 MXGP season was one that is completely unforgettable. Now, things would change in 1990. Jeff Leask would be caught in an accident at Vulcan's Ward where Jackie Martin smacked into him, and it kind of took the taste out of his mouth for racing, even though he was at such a high level. And a lot of people picked the 24-year-old to be the next 500 world champion. And because of what happened to him in 1990, he just decided, I'm going to finish out this season. And Jeff Leach just kind of pulled a Jean-Michel Bale. He just kind of disappeared from motocross after 1990, being as fast and as talented as he was. So this was part one of the career of Kurt Nicoll and how the 500 World Championship ended up eluding him. Stay tuned for part two, where we'll go into the 90s and we'll see how close he got. We'll go into detail of what happened, and if things had just gone a little bit different, it would have changed the outcome of Kurt Nicoll's championship hopes. But until then, thanks for watching up to this point. If you have any comments, if I got anything wrong, if I was off base on anything, please feel free to leave a comment. And thank you very much for watching.
I